What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good day. I'd like to start this video off by apologising for the losing bet on Taylor Santos last weekend. Obviously, if you watched my breakdown video for last week's card, you would have seen the title, the thumbnail, the analysis in that video, which said I thought Taylor Santos was a pretty good bet. To be honest, I still think she was a pretty good bet based on how the fight went. We'll get into that in a moment. But losing a bet on Santos does put us back at break even for the month, which is very disappointing. Obviously, the week before that, we recommended a bet on Yasmin Lasindu in this video here. Was very confident on Lasindu, so I bet double the amount on Lasindu that I bet on Santos. But unfortunately, we gave the unit of profit back we made on Lasindu on Santos last weekend. It's still been a pretty good year, though, to be fair. We've only had 2 losing months in the whole of 2023. You can see a very nice uptrend here, and I'm sure we'll be banking winners again before you know it. And to be honest, I guess we were due a bit of a loss. We've had some nice winners lately. We had the Yasmin Lasindu bet in this video, had the underdog bet on Justin Gaethje in this video, and you know, if things would have gone slightly differently, I think Taylor Santos would have got the win. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I feel about our bet on Santos, and then I'd be really keen to get your thoughts on the fight in the comments below. Was it a good bet? Was it a bad bet? Let me know what you think. So this is one of those losses where I can kind of take it pretty well, to be fair to you, because I do feel that our analysis was pretty spot on. When we looked at the fight, it was a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Santos the striker, Blanchfield the grappler, and based on past performances with how much damage Blanchfield had taken in, in the fights on the feet against Aldrich and Andrade, and based on how good Santos' takedown defense had looked in the past, it was pretty likely Santos would be able to keep the fight standing, and if she could, she would likely outstrike Blanchfield to a win. And obviously she was doing great in the first round. She was doing alright in the second round as well, to be fair. If you would have said to me last week, when I researched that fight, that Erin Blanchfield wouldn't land a single takedown in the fight and win a 3-round decision, I would have told you that you were crazy. I would have told you there must have been point deductions or something insane like that going on. Because the thought of Blanchfield being able to win a stand-up fight against Santos would have been unfathomable to me. You know, we've seen in the past, we've seen Santos in, hard, grueling 3-round fights, 5-round fights. She's never slowed down before. She's never gassed out before. She's always looked great. And even though I know Blanchfield put a crazy pace on her, Santos had never really shown any signs of slowing down before. So when she started to fade in the second half of the fight against Blanchfield, it was a big surprise to me. I guess that's why they call it gambling, right? You never know what you're going to get until fight day. But I think the fight between Santos and Blanchfield shows that this is a game of inches, and there's no such thing as a safe bet, right? Tiny little moments in fights can decide the outcome. Slight mistake, the wrong decision, and it can cost you. And I do think the outcome of that Santos Blanchfield fight all came down to one mistake Taylor Santos made in that second round. She won the first round pretty decisively, and in that second round, Blanchfield was kind of holding her up against the cage, wearing her out against the cage, but she wasn't really doing anything in round 2. In the first half of round 2, Santos outstruck her by a decent margin, and when they were in the clinch and Blanchfield was working for a takedown in round 2, Blanchfield wasn't getting near a takedown, and it was Santos that was landing the short elbows on the inside, the knees in the clinch. Remember, clinches are 50-50 positions, so it doesn't matter whose back is on the cage. It's all about who's landing more strikes, doing more damage in that position. So I had Santos winning the second round, and then for whatever reason, total moment of madness, Santos tried to hit some kind of throw, on Erin Blanchfield, and essentially pulled Blanchfield on top of her, and then spent the majority of the second half of the second round underneath Blanchfield, which obviously meant Blanchfield won round 2. But it was just one of those fights where it all came down to that one mistake Santos made. I'm not saying that Santos would definitely have gone on to win the fight had she not done that, but she was winning the second round up until that point. And she wasn't looking that tired at that point either. What really accelerated Santos getting tired was the fact that she spent time underneath Blanchfield trying to defend herself, and then she had to exert loads of energy to work her way back up to her feet towards the end of round 2. So it was one of those bets where it's just kind of like, I felt that analysis was correct. Betting Taylor Santos as an underdog against Erin Blanchfield in a fight where she didn't get taken down, I feel that was a pretty good bet. It didn't go in our favour. You can't win them all, right? You can't win every bet. But, we did predict that Blanchfield would struggle to get Santos down. That was true. The irony was that in the end, Santos took herself down. And that's what cost her. But I thought Blanchfield looked absolutely incredible. Showed the tough, gritty determination that's going to give so many girls in the division problems. And she's tough, man. She is tough. If you can walk down Taylor Santos and kind of, outwork her, take her best shots, you're going to have a lot of success in the division, because Santos is one of the best strikers in the division. Early on, Santos would lighten her up on the feet, hammering that lead leg, and Blanchfield just kept coming forward, wave after wave after wave after wave. So she looked amazing. To be honest, I was very disappointed in Santos slowing down. We spoke in the breakdown video last week about Santos having some turmoil with her team behind the scenes, with her coaches, her managers, and all that sort of stuff. So not sure if she showed up in the best shape or if it was just Blanchfield that wore her down. Difficult to say, but it's not a good look for Santos, looking that tired after 8-9 minutes in this division where, most girls in the top 5, top 10 have got great cardio. So bit of a red flag there. So anyway, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below about the bet, about the fight. And I'm pretty sure, based on this chart here, won't be long before we bank another winner. But moving on, I think it's time I gave some free trials away for live betting. What do you guys think? It's the start of a new month. I always like to give out some free trials at the start of every month to make sure our spaces are full in live betting. So it is early September, and if you fancy giving live betting a try, now is your chance. As you can see, we make a profit in almost every month on live betting. So if you watch every UFC event live, it's a really good opportunity for you to make a bit of cash while watching the UFC, while enjoying the fights and listening to myself as I commentate fights from a betting perspective. So if you'd like a free trial to live betting for the whole of September, which means you'll be able to live bet this event, UFC Paris, with me, it's really easy. All you need to do is go to my website, MMABettingTips.com. You'll find a link for that in the description below. And then if you scroll down to here, you can see there's a link to create a free account. Create a free account. Once you've created the free account, log into the website here, go all the way up to the top to where it says community, and go to setup Discord. Now, if you're not already a member of my Discord channel, you will see a button appear here. All you need to do once you're logged into your account on my website is click the button, and you'll then join the private Discord channel where my live betting tips are broadcast. You can actually see here it says live betting tips. Share all my live betting tips in there. So once you've got the free account, you've joined the Discord using this button, email me, info@MMABettingTips.com. I'll leave a link for that in the description below as well, or you can just go here, go to contact us, and all you need to do is let me know your username for the website and your username for Discord, so that I could basically get your account set up with free access for the whole of September to give live betting a try with us. And yeah, man, if you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, don't forget, head on over to my website where you'll find breakdown videos for every single fight on every single UFC card. In this video, you've only got time to break down the main card fights, but hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions and maybe even earn some extra cash. And what we will do before we break down the main event between Ciryl Gane and Sergey Spivak is talk a little bit about home advantage on this card, because home advantage is going to be something that plays a factor in so many fights on this card. So rather than me repeat myself on loads of different fights on this card, let's just talk about home advantage now and what it means. Because as you can see, I mean, we've got a French fighter in almost every fight on this card. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the 11 fights on this card feature a French fighter. So we know home advantage is going to be a pretty big deal this weekend. So how is home advantage likely to affect this card? Well, as we know, the French fans are very loud, they're very passionate, they're very supportive of their, French fighters, and they do a really good job of creating an intimidating, intense atmosphere for visiting fighters. And we know statistically home advantage is a pretty big deal in MMA, where fighters with home advantage in places like France win 65% of the time against fighters that are not from that country. So a part of that is due to, I think, favourable matchmaking in favour of hometown fighters. At the end of the day, the UFC is an entertainment business. It wants to please its customers, it wants to please its fans, and so if people are paying $200, $300, $400, $500 for a ticket to a UFC event, the UFC want to make sure that they feel happy with their purchase, right? And they have a great night. And one of the ways they can do that is by, WWE Vince McMahon style, giving the fighters that the fans are paying to watch the best chance of winning, right? No one wants to go this weekend and watch Benoit Saint-Denis lose or Cyril Gane lose. So because of this, they tend to give hometown fighters more favourable matchups, which probably plays into that 65% statistic. However, there is more to it. Obviously, we know judging is a huge problem in MMA, and we're all human, right? It's very difficult not to be influenced, right? We're all influenced by groupthink and social media and our peers and mob mentality at the end of the day. And if you've got an arena full of 10, 15, 20,000 people all cheering for one guy, it is very difficult for the judges not to be influenced by that. If Thiago Moises and Benoit Saint-Denis fight this weekend and Moises lands a clean right hand, it's probably going to be a giant tumbleweed. The crowd aren't going to react to it. If Benoit Saint-Denis lands a clean right hand, they're going to go crazy. And so even in very, very close competitive fights, judges will often lean towards the hometown fighters. So it will be very difficult for a lot of these guys from outside of France to beat French fighters by decision this weekend. So even though fighters like Namajunas or Sergey Spivak have got a really good chance of winning this weekend, it will not be easy for them to win by decision. Hometown advantage because of judges is a big deal. And another reason why hometown advantage is such a big deal is for the motivational aspect, right? In all sports, home advantage is huge. I always use the example of personal trainers, right? Why do people hire personal trainers? They don't hire them to learn how to exercise because all that information's online, right? You could watch tutorial videos on how to do exercises. You don't have a personal trainer because you need to learn about diet. All that information's online as well. A lot of the time, people hire personal trainers for accountability and motivation. If you're doing a 10k run by yourself, no one with you, it's easy for you to stop every time you get tired and take a breather, right? You don't have to push yourself because you're not accountable to anyone else. No one's running with you. If you stop, you're not letting anyone else down. And you've got no one motivating you apart from yourself to keep going. But if you're running with a personal trainer, every time you get tired, they give you that encouragement, they give you that lift, they give you that praise that you could do it, you can keep going, you can elevate your game, and you could do the 10k run without stopping, without slowing down. And the crowd in the arena will have the exact same impact on these French fighters. When they get tired, when they get hurt, the crowd can lift them, it can energize them, it can help them take their performance to the next level. Home advantage is a big deal, home support is a big deal. And that also contributes to that 65% statistic. It also works the other way, where if you are, not having any success in the fight. You're getting tired, you're getting hurt. The crowd are really behind your opponent. It's an intimidating atmosphere. It's a lot easier for you to break mentally and to fade into adrenaline dump. So it's like a double-edged sword for the hometown fighters. So home advantage will be very big this weekend. So how I would recommend approaching this from a betting point of view is think very carefully before you bet against French fighters this weekend. It's not going to be easy for non-French fighters to beat the French guys this weekend. It will be very, very difficult. So just think very carefully. If you research a fight like Sergey Spivak, Cyril Gane, or pick another one, Morgan Charrier versus Manolo Zucchini, and you think, oh, Zucchini or Spivak or Namajunas or Moises or anyone is a good bet, just make sure that you either think they can completely dominate their opponent or win inside the distance. Because if they can't do either of those things, they might find it very, very difficult to win. So, that is home advantage done and dusted. It is now time for us to talk about the main event at this weekend's card, which is going to be Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Cyril Gane is the favourite at average odds of around 1 point. It's quite a big odds spread actually. We will say 1.59, which is going to be minus 169 for an implied probability of 63%. If we take a look at the odds on Sergey Spivak, he's around an average of 2.40, which is going to be plus 140 for an implied probability of 42%. So Cyril Gane, 33 years old, 6'4", with an 81-inch reach. Sergey Spivak, 28 years old, 6'3", with a 78-inch reach. So we can see both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, nothing major there. So last weekend we spoke in depth about the fight between Taylor Santos, Erin Blanchfield, striker versus grappler matchup, and we put a lot of work into assessing whether Santos would be able to keep that fight standing. She did, still wasn't enough to get the win. But the same sort of stylistic dynamic is also at play here between Gane and Spivak, where Gane is the striker. Spivak has evolved to be predominantly a grappler, although he started as a striker. And I think we can all agree, if this fight stays standing, Gane's very likely to win. If Spivak can get the fight to the ground, Gane might be in some trouble. So where this fight is a little bit more difficult to predict than the Santos-Blanchfield fight is that we had a lot of footage available on Taylor Santos' takedown defense, and like we saw, it's very good, right? Blanchfield really struggled to get Santos down and hold her down to the point where she went 0 for 14 on takedown attempts, which is kind of crazy how good Santos' takedown defense is. But the problem with Cyril Gane is that there isn't that much footage available on his takedown defense and ground game, because he hasn't really fought any strong wrestlers for the most part, because there aren't many strong wrestlers in the heavyweight division. We can see John Jones, obviously, he was submitted very quickly. Tuivasa striker, Ngannou striker, Lewis striker, Volkov striker, Rosenstrike striker, Junior Dos Santos striker, Tanner Bosa striker, Dontal May striker, Rafael Pazao striker. So Gane has been very fortunate to not face a strong wrestler in any of his fights in the UFC up until this point in his career. And Sergey Spivak isn't a particularly strong wrestler, but next to John Jones, he's by far the best grappler that Gane will have faced in his UFC career so far. And what concerns me about this fight for Cyril Gane is that there are two fights where we've seen him having to defend himself against grapplers, and he didn't do a particularly good job. The first was obviously when he fought Francis Ngannou. It was actually Ngannou using a lot of grappling to beat Cyril Gane, and then obviously he was taken down, submitted very quickly in his last fight against John Jones. So how do I view this, right, in terms of both guys' path to victory, right? How do they match up in striking and grappling? If we start off with striking, that's going to be the easiest to get through. So I think we can all agree Gane has a huge advantage when it comes to striking. If he can keep the fight standing, you should be able to use his nice jab, his leg kicks, It was really technical striking to just chip away at Sergei Spivak from a safe distance. Spivak doesn't really have too much power in his hands. He's more of a volume striker as well, but he's nowhere near as technical as Cyril Gane, and he just doesn't have that kind of raw power in his hands that could flip a fight on his head. Spivak is a lot sloppier. He's not as technical and doesn't really land the hardest, most damaging shots. So if this fight stays standing, I think Cyril Gane is going to absolutely style on Spivak and win very, very comfortably. So even though we haven't seen a whole lot of Cyril Gane's takedown offense and ground game, what we do know is that his takedown offense hasn't looked great, and he has looked very low level on the ground. So if Spivak can get this fight to the ground, I think he's going to do really well. The problem for Spivak will be that his offensive wrestling isn't the best. And this is because he's not the most athletic guy. He's quite stiff, he's quite slow, he's quite a rigid, stiff, awkward heavyweight. So he's not particularly good at shooting nice deep double leg takedowns in on his opponent's hips. And because he's quite slow, he's not the best at setting his takedowns up either. One of the things we know Cyril Gane does very well is read his opponents. He's got great distance management, great footwork, great movement. And so when his opponents come forward and level change, he's very good at reading them and backing up and circling away. When you see Cyril Gane against guys like John Jones or Francis Ngannou, it's far easier for them to hit takedowns because they've got striking to set the takedowns up, right? John Jones, if he comes forward, you don't know if a teep kick to the knee is coming, a spinning elbow, a double leg takedown attempt. John Jones has got such a diversity of attacks that it's very, very difficult to read what he's going to do, which will make it easier for John to get the takedown because he's got the element of surprise on his hands. Similarly with Francis Ngannou, because he is probably the biggest power puncher in the history of the heavyweight division, when he comes forward to attack you, you're very, very worried about his punches, right? You don't want to eat one of those absolute bombs of a right hand that could knock you out. So when he comes forward, you're very preoccupied with the threat of his striking, the threat of the knockout, which opens up your lower body to a level change and a takedown. So Francis Ngannou, while Francis may not be as good of a wrestler as Spivak, again, having the ability to set those takedowns up and have the element of surprise on your side makes Ngannou a more tricky stylistic opponent for Gane, who doesn't really have to worry about Spivak's striking too much. So I do think Spivak, even though Gane's takedown offense and ground game has looked very bad, could really struggle to get this fight to the ground, because what we saw from Spivak when he faced a similar style to Cyril Gane in his fight against Tom Aspinall was that he couldn't get near a takedown. Spivak would kind of come forward quite stiff, quite rigid, and aimlessly try to grab hold of Aspinall, and Aspinall would just completely slam the door in his face and neutralize the threat of the takedown. And remember, if you go back to last week's breakdown video of the Taylor Santos Blanchfield fight, where we showed a lot of footage of those two, remember the key to identifying that Blanchfield would struggle to get a takedown in that fight was that the vast majority of Blanchfield's takedown attempts come above hip height. And that's also why she struggled to take Taylor Santos down last weekend. She just couldn't get in deep enough on the legs and hips to upset the balance of Santos. Spivak has the same trouble, and we actually saw that in his fight against Tom Aspinall. In actual fact, I think I will show you. I wasn't planning on showing you because the fight's only 2 minutes 30, so it doesn't show us a lot, but may as well, because there are a couple of examples in this fight which will help you appreciate what I'm trying to say. So obviously Aspinall has, more one-shot KO power than Gane, but they're similar in the way they fight because they use a lot of footwork, a lot of movement. They're kind of like the next generation of heavyweight fighter. They're very fast, they're very technical. So remember, similar to Erin Blanchfield from last weekend, what we're focusing on here is the struggle of Spivak to basically get in on the legs and hips of Aspinall. In fact, it's only 2.5 minutes, may as well watch the whole thing. So from here, what you'll see is Aspinall very, very light on his feet, and Spivak looking for the takedown. Anytime Spivak comes forward to try and grab a hold of Aspinall, because Spivak isn't really worried about, because Aspinall isn't really worried about Spivak's striking, he just backs up, which makes it very, very difficult for Spivak to grab a hold of him and start working for a takedown. You'll see it here, right? Pay attention. Every time Spivak comes forward, Aspinall will either move back to make it difficult for Spivak to grab hold of him, or he'll sting him with a counter, which will deter Spivak from coming forward. So you really see it here. The fight doesn't last very long. And I think this is one of those fights where just pretty early on, Spivak realised he wasn't going to be able to get a takedown. Just kind of waved the white flag. As soon as he kind of realised it was going to be difficult to tie Aspinall up and grab a hold of him, he was just like, I'm done here, bro. I'm not interested anymore. There's only a minute and a half left in this one, and we'll be done. And you can imagine, right, if you visualise Gane in there, Gane likes to fight in this range where he takes control of the centre of the octagon, uses length to kind of chip away at you, push you onto the outside, pressure you to fight in this uncomfortable trapped range, which we see Spivak in at the moment. And you can see Spivak just in a defensive shell here. And you can imagine from this position, Gane is going to be stinging Spivak with a jab, chipping away at him with the leg kicks. You can see Spivak is just really struggling to get the confidence to come forward and try and grab hold of Aspinall. You kind of see it there, right? Spivak comes forward and Aspinall just reads him and moves back. It's very subtle, but he just reads him. Watch, just very, very subtle. Spivak's going to come forward and try and grab a hold of him, and watch. Aspinall just reads it. Even before Spivak moves, Aspinall backs up. Spivak ends up throwing a jab. He had to retreat on the takedown attempt, but Spivak just realised in this fight that it's going to be very difficult to grab a hold of Aspinall. Very, very tricky. You can see just struggling to come forward and grab a hold of Aspinall, and he's going to have a very similar problem with Gane. Gane is just the same as Aspinall, very good at controlling the distance, reading his opponents. You see it there again. Every time Spivak comes forward, Aspinall just backs up. And because you see it there, right? Look, you see it there. Spivak comes forward, Aspinall's read it, showing him strong hips. Got the overhook on the left side, gets his back up against the cage, disengages. Doesn't allow Spivak to get anywhere near his legs. And then Spivak's like, oh, I've had enough, bro. I'm done here. And takes a knee. You can see it there, right? He was, for the first 2-3 minutes of this fight, every time he came forward to set up a takedown off a jab, Aspinall would just move back. So not only would the jab miss, but Aspinall was even further away from Spivak after the jab was thrown than he was before. So it's not like Spivak could follow through, close the distance, grab a hold of Aspinall and start working for a takedown. Aspinall was in a different zip code by the time Spivak had finished throwing, because he's very predictable. These high level strikers are very, very good at reading subtle changes in body language to know when a level change is coming. And you really see it here. And another problem, exactly the same as with Blanchfield last week, when Spivak shoots, it's just not in deep enough on the legs and hips of Aspinall. And for these athletic guys with good balance like Gane and Aspinall, you have to get in very, very deep on their legs. And look at this, the distance that Aspinall maintains. Aspinall knows so long as he doesn't let Spivak get in on his legs, it's going to be very difficult for Spivak to get the takedown. Look at the posture, the body language here. Look at Aspinall trying to arch his back to keep Spivak as far away from his legs as possible. Look at this. Look at this space in here. He's pushing off on this side so that Spivak can't change levels. And Aspinall, look, he's pushing to the extent that he just wants to keep Spivak away from his legs and his hips. And because of that, Spivak tries a little judo throw there, but can't get near it again because Aspinall's legs and hips too far away. Disengages then. And just decides, fuck all this noise. Little elbow on the inside, job done. So yeah, it will be very, very difficult for Spivak to get this fight to the ground, because he doesn't really have the striking to set the takedowns up. Gane's very good at reading his opponents. That fight's only 2.5 minutes long, but because Gane's style is very similar to Aspinall's. It shows us the challenges that, you know, Spivak is going to face in getting this fight to the ground. So from a betting point of view, I do lean Gane in this one, but he's not the type of fighter I would bet in a fight like this, because I don't like betting in situations where I'm betting on a favourite and their opponent's strength is that fighter's biggest weakness. So even though we know Gane is likely to do very well if the fight stays standing, we've also seen him look very bad, very low level on the ground in his fights against John Jones, Francis Ngannou. We know if Spivak gets him down, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. And those aren't the kind of bets that I like to place, because, you know, I want to get my money into much stronger positions than that. You know, you look at the kind of bets we've been placing. We knew Santos had a big advantage on the feet, and we knew Blanchfield would struggle to get her down. She lost the fight, but pretty good bet in my opinion, underdog odds. Yasmin Lasindu, we knew she was better than Polyana Viana everywhere. These two bets are a hedge, so they don't really count. Justin Gaethje, we knew he had an advantage over Dustin Poirier pretty much every single aspect of MMA at this stage of his career. He got the job done for us. Miranda Maverick, significantly better than Priscilla Cachoeira on the ground, dominated her on the ground. Moreno, we identified that, you know, it was going to be very difficult for Pantoja to outwork him over 5 rounds. Pantoja did outwork him over 5 rounds, is what it is. Damir Ismagulov, very difficult to take down, very difficult to hold down. Grant Dawson came in looking like the Arizona Damian Maia. Made big improvements at ATT, looked absolutely incredible in that fight, and is an absolute nightmare. Fakhretdinov, we knew it would be very difficult for Kevin Lee to keep up with the pace Fakhretdinov sets, because Kevin Lee slows down a lot as fights wear on. And obviously Randy Brown, better than Wellington Turman everywhere. The pattern, the trend amongst all the bets we place is that we're betting fighters that have big advantages over their opponents in most areas, and if they don't have advantages everywhere, it's going to be very difficult stylistically for their opponent to actually use the advantages they have. Like with the example of Blanchfield struggling to get takedowns last week. Wasn't that likely she'd be able to win a stand-up fight. She did, and we lose the bet. But, you know, pretty good value in my opinion based on how the fight went. Santos underdog, very difficult to see her losing a stand-up fight. But this doesn't fit into that category, because we know if the fight goes to the ground, Gane's in a lot of trouble. So this fight is an easy pass for me. My lean would be Gane, but I feel his advantages are mostly baked into the odds, and this is one of those fights where I think the odds are pretty much where they should be. In terms of the over-under, it's kind of tricky, this one, because both guys are not that dangerous. Neither of them have really got too much power in their hands. They don't have that kind of raw physicality, that one-shot KO power that most heavyweights have. But it is difficult for me to see Sergey Spivak being able to survive 5 rounds against Cyril Gane on the feet. Spivak's cardio is reasonably good for a heavyweight, but 25 minutes is a long time to be getting jabbed in the face, kicked to the body, having your legs attacked with those nice technical teep kicks that Gane likes to throw out there. So even though if you look at Spivak's record, you know, most of his finishes are on the ground, and he may struggle to get Gane to the ground, he looked so vulnerable on the feet against Aspinall that I think even though Gane is a bit of a decisionator, he will break Spivak down with pressure and volume if the fight stays standing. And so I don't think it's likely this fight will go to a decision. But I would imagine it would last a while. But yeah, there's nothing really, you know, in terms of the over-unders I like. There's nothing really I like there, to be honest. In terms of the prop bets, Gane by knockout or TKO I think is the most likely outcome, just kind of breaking Spivak down with volume, eventually getting a stoppage, but the odds are absolutely terrible on that. So I would give that a miss. So yeah, props a bit dead on that fight. Now let's break down the co-main event, Manon Fiorot against Rose Namajunas. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Manon Fiorot is the favourite at average odds of around 1.55, which is minus 182 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Namajunas, she's around an average of 2.50, which is going to be plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So Fiorot, 33 years old, 5'7", with a 66-inch reach. Namajunas, 31 years old, 5'5", with a 65-inch reach. So on paper, both these girls roughly the same age, roughly the same size. But there are a couple of notable X factors on this one. The first being, this will be Rose's first fight back in over a year. So you've got ring rust to consider. And on top of that, this is Rose's first fight at flyweight in a very, very long time. And so she's, you know, even though she's roughly the same size as Manon Fiorot on paper in terms of wingspan, there could be a difference in size here in terms of physicality. We know Fiorot is big, strong, muscular. We were talking a lot about physicality in the Blanchfield Santos breakdown last weekend. And so the physical advantage kind of goes to Fiorot here. She's also got home advantage in this one, so it won't be easy for Rose to win a decision unless she absolutely dominates Manon Fiorot. So obviously, look at my video this week I've put out on home advantage. Definitely something to consider in this one if you want to bet this fight. But this is a real interesting matchup. Even though Fiorot is a little bit older than Namajunas, it's kind of like old school versus new school, right? Fiorot, from that new crop of fighter, is trying to work her way into the title picture. And Rose Namajunas, been there, done it, seen it, had the belt, held the belt, won the belt. And so, you know, is Rose now going to turn into a bit of a gatekeeper where, you know, fighters on the come up need to beat Rose to get into that title picture? Or is she going to show this weekend that there's levels to this game and will be too big of a step up for Fiorot? Because to be fair, if you look at Fiorot's record, she hasn't really fought anyone anywhere near the level of Rose. You know, Caitlin Chukagian, nowhere near the level of Rose. Same goes for Maya, Mayra Bueno Silva, Tabitha Ritchie. This is a big step up in competition for Fiorot. And while she has looked reasonably good, you know, in her fights in the UFC so far, there are a lot of issues with Fiorot's overall skill set. And this is a massive step up in competition for her. So the main issue I have with betting Rose's fights, and my issue with Rose has always been, she's very, very inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get from her. You don't know if the aggressive, technical, you know, high volume, nightmare version of Rose is going to show up, the version that enabled her to actually win the title in the first place, or if the passive, tentative, bad fight IQ Rose is going to show up that basically did absolutely nothing against Carla Esparza for 25 minutes and lost a split decision and her belt when she probably could have absolutely dominated and smoked Carla Esparza if she would have just actually tried. So personally, Rose Namajunas is a fighter that, unless I can get her at really decent underdog odds in a very favourable matchup for her, I'm not interested in betting her. Because Namajunas is one of these fighters where I feel it's always 50-50 whether they're going to show up. You know, 50% of the time she might show up looking like the best fighter in the division, completely run through her opponent. The other 50% of the time she might just shadow box for 25 minutes in a world title fight and do absolutely nothing against Carla Esparza. And the reason why we're able to, you know, make a profit almost every month in live betting, or, you know, only make a loss in 2 months in the whole of 2023 on pre-fight bets, is because we don't take marginal positions where our money is in a lot of danger. We only take bets where we overwhelmingly stack the odds in our favour. Even when we lose, we know we've really got a good risk to reward ratio on our cash. Taylor Santos last weekend, Blanchfield didn't hit a single takedown, and we were able to get Santos at underdog odds. She lost, but very strong position, and that's how we continue to grind out profits on both pre-fight and live bets over such a long period of time. When it comes to fighters like Rose Namajunas, you just cannot trust them to show up and fight for your money. And so I always feel like you're in this coin flip situation where she may just set fire to your money on the night. And that isn't a strong position for you to put your cash. So whenever I research a fight involving Rose Namajunas, unless I can get her at crazy underdog odds, I'm just not interested in betting her. Because if you look at her odds this weekend, they're around an average of 2.50. That's an implied probability of 40%. Even if this is the best stylistic matchup in the world for Rose, which it isn't, if we know it's 50-50 whether she's going to show up or not, you're still not getting a particularly good, edge over the bookie in the odds, considering all the crazy shit that can happen in MMA. Bad decisions, we got home advantage here, disqualifications, point deductions, bad weight cuts, injuries, all that kind of stuff, chaos. So I'm not interested in betting Rose this weekend because she brings a lot of risk with her. But what I'm going to do is talk about how these two match up stylistically, how I see it. But just know when we break this fight down, it's a little bit tricky because Rose being inconsistent makes it very difficult to know what to get from her. When we bet a fight like Blanchfield-Santos last weekend, it's easy because Blanchfield and Santos fight the same in every fight, right? They're very consistent. Which makes it easy to visualize how they match up stylistically. With a fight like this, we don't really know what to expect from Rose. Are we going to get the version of Rose the Foot Carla? Are we going to get the version of Rose the Foot Zhang? Are we going to get the version of Rose the Foot Jędrzejczyk? Are we going to get a better version of Rose we've never seen before? Are we going to get the worst version of Rose we've ever seen before? We don't know. So when we talk about how these two girls match up stylistically, there's an asterisk next to everything I say about Rose because we just don't know what we're going to get. So what I've got to do is look at all of Rose's performances over the last couple of years, or last 2-3 years, because she hasn't fought in the last year, and give you an overview of generally what we see from her. But depending on what version of her shows up, could be completely different. If this fight stays standing and we get the best version of Rose, I think Manon Fiorot is in a lot of trouble. If Rose turns up hungry, motivated, ready to go this weekend, I think Fiorot is in an absolute mountain of trouble against Rose. Because I think Rose is several levels above Manon Fiorot when it comes to striking. Fiorot's style of striking for me is very similar to Holly Holmes, where she throws a lot of side push kicks, teep kicks, which don't really have anything on them. They're not particularly powerful, they're not particularly damaging, and when she throws them, she's often leaving herself very open, very vulnerable to counters. Her striking, her boxing is not the most accurate, doesn't land the hardest, most impactful shots. It's a little bit sloppy, she's not the best defensively. What I really like about Fiorot is that she fights at a high pace. She throws a very high volume of strikes. Very similar to Holly Holm. She does chip away at you. And she stays very busy. But in terms of landing clean, hard, impactful shots, she doesn't do a whole lot. Not particularly dangerous on the feet. She looks great against girls like Caitlin Chookagian or Tabitha Ritchie or Victoria Leonardo, when she's throwing crazy combinations against Ritchie and Leonardo and lighting them up on the feet, getting these TKOs. She looks amazing. But Ritchie, Leonardo, whole different ball game compared to Rose Namajunas. Because when you come forward and aggressively attack fighters like Leonardo or Ritchie, you don't have to worry about anything coming back in your direction, right? You don't have to worry about counters. You don't have to worry about taking damage. You don't have to worry about defending yourself. You can just hulk out, go for the kill, and overwhelm them with pressure, pace, aggression, because they don't really have the power in their hands or technique to back you up and make you pay for being overly aggressive. Namajunas clearly does. Ask Weili Zhang about what can happen if you let your guard down for a second or get overly aggressive with Rose. Now obviously Rose moving up a weight class means her power may not translate up to a higher weight class. Perhaps she won't have the power to hurt Fiorot like she will, girls in the strawweight division. But in terms of footwork, movement, speed, technique, power, impactfulness, on the feet, it all goes to Rose. I think if Rose shows up, performs to her full potential, I'd even go as far as saying Fiorot is screwed. Because I don't think Fiorot's like volume strikes that she chips away at you with are going to bother Rose in any way. Because of the speed, the accuracy, the technique of Rose, I think she's going to land hard, nasty, damaging shots on Fiorot. There's a big speed difference between these two and a big technique advantage too. But everything I just said totally hinges on what version of Rose we get. Because like I said earlier when we were talking about how they match up stylistically on the feet, what I really like about Fiorot is her consistency and volume. She's going to have the crowd behind her this week. She knows a win over Rose will put her into the title picture. She's going to be hungry, motivated, mean, nasty, aggressive. She's the beast. So you know she's going to be walking Rose down, throwing a high volume of strikes, very aggressive. We absolutely know Fiorot is going to show up and bring it this weekend. The same can't be said about Rose. So what we do know is if Rose shows up and performs like she did against Carla Esparza and just dances around and doesn't really throw anything for the whole fight, or if she shows up like the fight against Jessica Andrade where she faded after 7 or 8 minutes and then got dominated in the second half of the fight, if those versions of Rose show up, Fiorot is going to outwork her on the feet, outvolume her, outpoint her, and Rose is going to be in a lot of trouble. But if Fiorot starts to come forward and chip away with those lazy side push kicks and those sloppy punches which don't have a lot on him, and Rose starts to counter her and let her hands go, Fiorot's going to be in a lot of trouble. So how these two match up on the feet really depends on what version of Rose we get. And that's how I see it. Now in terms of grappling, it's an interesting fight to break down from a grappling point of view. And this is one of those areas where physicality could have a big impact on the outcome of this matchup. Because even though Fiorot isn't the most physically imposing striker, I feel when it comes to grappling, this is where her physicality really shines. Because she isn't a particularly skilled grappler. She's not a particularly technically good grappler. But she's able to have a lot of success in grappling positions just by being bigger and stronger than almost everyone that she faces, to the extent that she can almost overpower them on the ground. Namajunas is an interesting fighter when it comes to grappling because she's one of these grapplers that is very good offensively. So, deadly submission game, heavy top game, really good offensive wrestling, great double legs, all that kind of thing. But Rose's takedown defense is pretty bad and she's very, very weak off her back. So if Rose is the aggressor in grappling positions, she's an absolute nightmare. But if you put her on her back and control her, it's kind of easy to hold her down and rack up a lot of grappling control. So in terms of how these two match up when it comes to grappling, I give Fiorot the advantage. I think that Rose will find it difficult to get the bigger, stronger girl down. You know, Fiorot's got good balance. She's strong. She's difficult to hold down. Good at scrambling back up to her feet. And if both girls were on their backs, I'd be a lot more concerned for Rose because Fiorot's got that heaviness to her grappling control, that tightness, that crushing physicality that Rose doesn't have. And we know Rose is very, very weak off her back. So, you know, this is a fight where both girls have different advantages in different areas. But one thing that is important to remember, Rose only has an advantage on the feet if the best version of her shows up. If Rose isn't at her best, Fiorot will likely outpoint her and outwork her on the feet. So what does all this mean from a betting point of view? Well, for me it means that Fiorot deserves to be the favourite for a start. Rose's inconsistency means, you know, Fiorot might just chip away at her and outpoint her on the feet. Fiorot's got home advantage, and in my opinion, the advantage on the ground due to her physicality. Doesn't mean Rose can't catch her in a crazy submission, because Fiorot is quite green on the ground. But overall, Fiorot has got more advantages in this fight than Namajunas, in my opinion. And as a result, Fiorot deserves to be the favourite. The problem is, I feel Fiorot's advantages are mostly baked into her odds. And with Namajunas capable of causing her major problems if she actually shows up this weekend in terms of, you know, Namajunas' advantages on the feet, This fight is an easy pass for me. I do have a feeling this might be one of those y'all must have forgot fights. You know, if Rose shows up motivated, I think Fiorot is in a lot of trouble. But very difficult to trust Namajunas at this stage in her career. To be fair, it's been a few years since she's looked at her best as well. I don't think she looked particularly good in her split decision win over Zhang back in 2021. So it's been a long time since Rose looked really, really good. I think probably the last time we saw Rose look amazing was 5 years ago when she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So, you know, Rose is still pretty young in her career at 31 years old. Still time for her to get better. But the record of 11-5 kind of speaks to her inconsistent career, where she's lost fights that she should have won pretty easily, in my opinion, with how skilled she is. So this fight's an easy pass for me. In terms of my lean, if you really, really want to bet this fight, I would go Fiorot. I think it's going to be difficult for Rose to win a decision in France, with Fiorot having home advantage, and on top of that, I don't see Rose finishing Fiorot. Fiorot's pretty tough, and so yeah. If you really want to bet this fight, go Fiorot, but the odds are dead. They're really dead. In terms of the over-under, I would not bet the under on this fight. I think it's very, very likely the fight goes to a decision. Fiorot isn't that dangerous. Doesn't have the most power in her hands unless she's facing girls that can't defend themselves, like Leonardo Ricci, which Rose is not. Both girls reasonably good at defending themselves everywhere. Namajunas does pose a big threat of a knockout to Fiorot, but I'm wondering whether Namajunas' power will translate up to the heavier weight class. Will she be as dangerous at flyweight as she was at strawweight? And she might not even show up looking that dangerous anyway if if she doesn't perform. So yeah, man, it's one of those fights where very likely to go to a decision, in my opinion. And it's only a 3-rounder as well, which is something we haven't seen Rose in for a while, with her being in the title picture for so long. So in terms of the prop bets, the only one that I would consider is Fiorot by decision, but the odds are absolutely terrible, so I would give that a miss. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is Benoit Saint-Denis versus Thiago Moises. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Benoit Saint-Denis is the favourite at average odds of about 1.61, which is minus 164 for an implied probability of 62%. If we take a look at the odds on Thiago Moises, he's around an average of 2.35, which is going to be plus 135 for an implied probability of 43%. So Saint-Denis is 27 years old, 5'11" with a 73-inch reach, and Moises is 28 years old, 5'9" with a 70.5-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. Benoit Saint-Denis a little bit longer, a little bit taller than Moises. And I need to start off this breakdown video by saying that I think home advantage is going to be absolutely massive in this fight. And I also want to say that I'm very, 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 very tempted to bet Benoit Saint-Denis this weekend. So please let me know in the comments below whether you're betting Saint-Denis. If you're watching this on my website, please let me know on Discord if you are betting Saint-Denis, if you think I should be betting Saint-Denis. For me, Saint-Denis, very, very tempting bet. I have big concerns over him, which I will get into throughout this breakdown. I'm just not sure they will matter. So, very tempted to bet Saint-Denis this weekend. So, if we start off by talking about how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. In fact, let's get into this in a moment. Now, I said I wouldn't repeat myself and talk about home advantage in these videos when I did a separate video on home advantage, but this is one fight where I do feel I need to talk about home advantage a bit, because I think this is one fight where home advantage could play a massive factor. Benoit Saint-Denis has a style of fighting and a personality that people love. Saint-Denis can energize an arena, get people on their feet, and generate a crazy atmosphere in a stadium outside of France because of how exciting and chaotic his style is. in Paris, I mean, when this guy fights, the arena is going to be shaking. It's going to be so intense, so intimidating for Thiago Moises. This is the exact kind of fight where home advantage is huge, because Saint-Denis is going to feed off that energy of the crowd. It's going to enable him to take things to the next level. Whereas Moises, I think, is really going to struggle to perform to his full potential in that kind of atmosphere. So, what I can say from a betting point of view, Benoit Saint-Denis has a lot of issues, which is why I am on the fence about betting him. But there's no way I would bet Thiago Moises this weekend, because beating this guy in France is not going to be easy. So if we consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, first of all, let's talk about striking. Now, very different styles of striking. Saint-Denis is an aggressive pressure fighter that likes to come out hard, take control of the centre of the octagon, put his opponents onto the back foot and just overwhelm them. He's got devastatingly impactful kicks and he's reasonably dangerous on the feet. Moises, the complete opposite. He throws far less volume than Benoit Saint-Denis. He's more of a sniper that likes to pick his shots. He's got a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he likes to stay on the outside and just kind of focus on defending himself, and he throws very much single strikes. There is no way that Moises is going to be able to outpoint Benoit Saint-Denis in this fight. He just can't match the output, the work rate, the volume of Saint-Denis. My only issue with Saint-Denis when it comes to his striking is that he's very bad defensively. And this is only because when you're so aggressive and you put yourself in a position to finish your opponents and overwhelm them with that aggression, you are wide open to big counters. And we've seen him take a lot of damage in the Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos fight. And we've seen him eat clean counters in every single one of his fights in the UFC, to be fair. Moises isn't the most dangerous counter striker, but when you're as bad defensively as Saint-Denis is, it only takes one shot to put you away. So I do think Saint-Denis is going to overwhelm Moises with volume and land the harder, more impactful shots. But I could never rule out Saint-Denis getting knocked out, even against guys that aren't particularly dangerous on the feet, because of how bad he is defensively. And what I would be really worried about with Saint-Denis in this fight is if he were to get rocked or wobbled or dropped, and then Moises would kind of like jump on him, get to his back, or, you know, get on top of him, jump on a guillotine, submit him, something like that, while Saint-Denis is still dazed, still hurt, trying to recover, because Moises does have a very dangerous submission game. But on the feet, if Saint-Denis can avoid getting knocked out, I think he overwhelms Moises, wins the striking comfortably. Now, when it comes to grappling, things get a lot more complicated. Thiago Moises, high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but we know Benoit Saint-Denis is primarily a grappler as well. The problem with assessing this fight from a grappling point of view is we haven't seen a whole lot of Benoit Saint-Denis grappling. There's not tons of footage on Saint-Denis grappling because so many of his fights in his career have ended so quickly. And the fights where we have seen some of his grappling have either ended very quickly or they've been against the level of opponent who's nowhere near as good as Thiago Moises on the ground. Remember, Moises arguably did better on the ground against Islam Makhachev than Charles Oliveira did. You know, this guy's ground game is no joke. High-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, trains at American top team. He's only 28 years old. He's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. So I'm struggling to kind of work out who will have the edge on the ground here. I'm pretty sure Thiago Moises will be the better technical grappler out of the two. But Benoit Saint-Denis has looked like a reasonably good MMA grappler with decent takedowns, good grappling control, and he's very busy as well. He's always working. So if the fight went to the ground, even though Moises may be the more technical out of the two, I could see Saint-Denis outworking him, especially with the crowd behind him. Now, cardio may also come into this fight. When Thiago Moises first came into the UFC, he would gas pretty bad in his early fights. Now, over the years, training full-time at ATT, he's improved his cardio a lot, which means it's been a while since we saw him gas in a fight. And to be fair, we saw a similar thing with Grant Dawson, right? Earlier in Grant Dawson's career, when he was training under James Krause, he used to gas out in pretty much every fight. But since he's been training at ATT, Grant Dawson's cardio has been getting better and better and better. Same can be said for Thiago Moises, to the point where his cardio isn't really that much of an issue anymore, especially in a 3-rounder. However, in a fight like this, where he's got a crazy guy who's going to be making him work super hard, standing up and on easy, it does increase the probability of Thiago Moises adrenaline dumping and getting tired, or just getting outworked and getting tired. So that's something else to think about as well. I'm far more confident in Saint-Denis' cardio than I am Thiago Moises. Although, to be fair, Saint-Denis did slow down a lot in the Elizeu Zaleski-Santos fight. But it's difficult to say if that was due to, the crazy pace that fight was contested at, or brain damage. Probably a little bit of both. That fight was definitely mad. So yeah, I'm very, very tempted to bet Saint-Denis in this fight, because he's got home advantage, big advantage on the feet if he can avoid getting knocked out. I think good chance he outworks Moises on the ground as well. But let me know what you think in the Discord. Let me also know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what you think, guys, about that one. So in terms of the over-under on this fight, it's tricky. I'd be surprised if this fight went to a decision, because Benoit Saint-Denis is one of these guys that initiates action. Whenever you've got a guy like Benoit Saint-Denis where there's no breaks, every single second on the feet he's going to be trying to kill you. On the ground, he's going to be looking to take you out. Whenever you've got a guy like that, very likely a fight ends inside the distance. He's got a kill or be killed style. Either he's going to get finished or he's going to finish you. Having said that, both these guys are reasonably well-rounded. Very skilled everywhere. Pretty tough, pretty good defensively. So I don't feel crazy confident this fight is going to go or going to end inside the distance. Like you can see, Moises has been to lots of decisions. So I don't really have a strong opinion on the over-under. I think it's more likely it ends inside the distance, but the fact the odds are at slight favourite odds mean there's very little upside in betting that. I'm going to be staying away from the over-under on this matchup. In terms of prop bets, one prop I would look at is Saint-Denis to win in round 3. Like I say, we know Moises has slowed in the past. The atmosphere might get to him, cause him to adrenaline dump. And we know Saint-Denis is very aggressive, who's always looking for a finish, and he fights at a very high pace. So look for Saint-Denis to win in round 3. Odds are 10.0 plus 900. Like I say, it's not particularly likely to win, but with odds like that, you don't need to win many bets like that in order to earn a long-term profit. I'm not going to be betting it myself. I don't like props, but if you're the kind of person who wants to sprinkle a little bit of money on every fight to make watching more interesting, that would be a prop that I would go for. So very tempted to bet Benoit Saint-Denis, but I don't know if he fits that kind of strict criteria that has helped us make a profit pretty much every month in 2023, apart from small losses in February and July. Don't know if Saint-Denis ticks every box, but he's very, very tempting. Let me know what you think. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Volkan Oezdemir against Bogdan Guskov. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Oezdemir is the favourite at average odds of around 1.55, which is going to be minus 182 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Guskov, he's around an average of 2.50, which is going to be plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So Oezdemir, 33 years old, 6'2", with a 75-inch reach. Guskov, 30 years old, 6'3". We don't know what his reach is. It's his UFC debut, which is another X factor in itself. Outside of that, both guys look roughly the same age, roughly the same size. So, very, very difficult fight from a betting point of view. There's quite a few guys on this card where there's very little footage available on them. Guskov is one of them. If you look at his record, you can see that all of his fights over the last 4 years have ended in round 1. So barely any footage available on this guy from the last 4 years. The last time this guy went deep in a fight was all the way back in 2019 against Nurlan Toktob-Bakayev. And even before that, most of his fights ended very, very, very quickly. So for me, there just isn't enough footage available on Guskov to know what to expect from him. And this is one of those fights where I don't really have any opinion on him at all. One thing that is very interesting about Guskov is that his record is extremely padded. I don't know if it's like if he's friends with the promoters or if he co-owns the promotion or what's going on with this guy. But most of the guys that he fought that he finished quickly, you could see visually very early on they were nowhere near like a decent level of MMA fighter. And a lot of them were also a lot smaller than Guskov. So this is one of those guys that when you look at him, he's from Uzbekistan, part of the world where we know produce extremely good MMA fighters. His record's very impressive at 14-2. But when you look at him, his record is very, very, very padded. I mean, look at it, man. 0-0, 0-4, 1-1, 0-0, 0-0, 7-8, 0-0, 6-4, 12-9, 6-4. So this guy went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He went 10-1 before he'd even faced any fighter that was anywhere near decent on paper. Then he lost to Vasilevsky, and then he fought a guy who's 4-2, 7-2, 4-1, 20-10. So yeah, man, it's like this guy is a struggle for me. I just don't have a strong read on him at all. There's barely any footage available on him. His record is very padded. I don't have a strong read on this at all. I just don't know what to say, basically. Very strange. So, in terms of on the feet, we know Volkan Oezdemir does hit very hard. He is very stiff, though. He is very slow. But he's difficult to take down. He's tough. He's got a good chin. Can fight at a decent pace for 3 rounds. Can't really talk about Guskov's striking. All of his fights over the last few years have ended very quick. He looks alright, but I don't have anything for you. There's just not enough footage. And there's basically 0 footage available on his grappling. So, yeah, this fight is dead. Best case scenario for us from a betting point of view is that this fight goes deep, goes all 3 rounds. We get to see a bit of Guskov striking, his takedown offense, his ground game. Then next time he fights, we'll have a much better idea of what to expect from him. But for now, the guy is a complete unknown. So, dead from a betting point of view, I would stay away from this. And because we just don't really know anything about Guskov, can't really make a prediction on the over-under or the prop bets either. So this fight, easy pass for me. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be William Gomis versus Yanis Ghemmouri. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Gomis is the favourite at average odds of around 1.45, which is going to be minus 222 for an implied probability of 69%. If we take a look at the odds on Ghemmouri, he's around an average of 2.80, which is going to be plus 180 for an implied probability of 36%. So Gomis, 26 years old, 6 foot tall, 73-inch reach. Ghemmouri, 28 years old, 5'9". We don't know what his reach is. But when you look at Ghemmouri's past fights, he does have quite a small, compact frame. So I'd imagine Gomis has probably got a decent sized reach advantage over him in this one. He does a good job of fighting long, uses his length. Even if the number doesn't give him a big reach advantage, because of how they fight, the stance they fight at, the way Gomis is able to control the distance, I think Ghemmouri's going to find it difficult to get inside on Gomis and land. So, interesting fight this one. Ghemmouri obviously making his UFC debut against a very tough stylistic opponent in Gomis. This is going to be a really, really difficult fight for Ghemmouri. From what I can see, again, similar to Mr. Guskov, there's not tons of recent footage available on Ghemmouri's record. If you look at it, his last 2 fights have ended, early in the second round with Raza, late in the second round against Shepin, but they were not very good. 10-5, 10-5. This is another guy whose record is pretty padded. A lot of his wins come against a very, very low level of opponent. But Based on how these two match up stylistically, what I can tell you is there's more footage available on Ghemmouri than there is on Guskov. So we do have a reasonably good idea of what to expect from this one. So if the fight stays standing, Gomis has got a huge advantage. He's going to completely outclass Ghemmouri. Ghemmouri stands quite stiff, quite rigid, quite flat-footed, doesn't read his opponents particularly well, isn't that technical, isn't that good offensively. Gomis has got good footwork, good movement, uses his length very well, throws a nice diverse range of strikes. He's very good at chipping away at his opponents and outpointing them. My one issue with Gomis' striking is that he is a little bit passive at times. He struggles to put his stamp on rounds. He doesn't show a lot of urgency. He kind of just tries to outpoint guys. But because of that, with Gomis, you often get, you know, a minute or two of inactivity where rounds end up being really close because he doesn't do a whole lot. The complete opposite of Saint-Denis, that is flat out aggressive, non-stop, action-packed, big drama show. So yeah, Gomis, one of these guys that is quite difficult to trust, but technically has a massive advantage on the feet over Ghemmouri. If the fight stays standing, pretty confident Gomis is going to get this done. But obviously what we've seen from Gomis in his two fights in the UFC against both Francis Marshall and Jano Erens is that his takedown defense is pretty bad. And he's very, very, very weak off his back. Gomis is one of these guys that if you put him on his back, you can just hold him down easily and he'll barely make any effort to get back up to his feet at all. Now, I don't think that's going to cost him in this fight, because Ghemmouri isn't a particularly good offensive wrestler. Doesn't have the most physicality to his grappling. Doesn't do a particularly good job of getting in on the legs and hips of his opponent. He has used grappling in some of his past fights and, you know, had a decent amount of top control. But for the most part, it was because his opponents gave up really cheap takedowns that he didn't really have to work very hard for. Didn't use the best offensive wrestling to get the fights to the ground. So this is one of those matchups where Gomis is probably going to be able to keep it standing because his takedown defense isn't completely awful and Ghemmouri's offensive wrestling is really bad. And on the feet, we know Gomis has got a big advantage when it comes to striking. So from a betting point of view, I do lean towards Gomis in this fight. But I can't bet him because his takedown defense and ground game is a deal breaker. And if Ghemmouri comes into this fight with a wrestling singlet on, you know, motivated, hungry, comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, decent cardio, spams takedowns for 15 minutes, I think he stands a pretty good chance of winning. Based on past performances, that's not particularly likely to happen, but it wasn't particularly likely that Blanchfield would win a fight, a stand-up fight against Taylor Santos, and it happened. So that fight's a reminder that crazy shit happens every weekend in MMA. So yeah, Gomis very likely to win. But can't bet him because his takedown defense and ground game is a deal breaker. So because this fight was only announced a couple of days ago, we don't have over-unders props for that yet. So we can't go into that. Let's move on to the next fight. So the final fight that I want to talk about in this breakdown video is going to be Kledson Rodrigues versus Farid Basharat. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Basharat is the favourite at average odds of around 1.29, which is going to be minus 345 for an implied probability of 78%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent Rodrigues, he is around an average of 3.70, which is going to be plus 270 for an implied probability of 27%. So Rodrigues, 27 years old, 5'6" with a 67-inch reach, and Basharat, 26 years old, 5'8" with a 71-inch reach. So, as you can see, both guys roughly the same age, but Basharat longer and taller than Kledson Rodrigues. So Basharat, one of the biggest favourites on the card, and I can see why. This is a very good stylistic matchup for him. He's 10-0. He's very, very good everywhere, very well-rounded. And this is a difficult stylistic matchup for Rodrigues for reasons we'll get into now. So, I will say this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. It isn't really, but in the context of this fight, it is. Rodrigues very much has a base in striking. And while Farid Basharat is like a well-rounded fighter that does a bit of everything, his advantages on the ground over Rodrigues mean that you can kind of categorize this as a striker versus grappler matchup, because if Basharat uses a grappling heavy game plan in this fight, Rodrigues is going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, if the fight stays standing, I do think it'll be very competitive. Both guys are pretty well matched. They have very different styles of striking, but very well matched. So Rodrigues lands the harder, more impactful, more damaging strikes than Basharat. He's also a lot more aggressive. He's also better defensively, and he throws a higher volume. I'd actually say Rodrigues has the advantage on the feet. Now, there's nothing wrong with Basharat's striking. He's very technical. He moves very well. He throws a decent volume himself, but he just doesn't land with the same impactfulness or power that Rodrigues does. And Basharat, I worry, is a little bit bad defensively as well. No one's been able to make him pay for it up until this point in his career. He's 10-0. But he does fight in one of those upright, rigid stances with his hands down pretty low and his chin up high and exposed. And he relies on his ability to control the distance and measure distance with his length. And seeing his opponent come forward to attack him, and his ability to be able to read him, to kind of see those shots coming and use head movement to kind of get out of the way. Problem is, when you don't get it right, you can eat clean, hard shots. And when you have your hands down low, chin up high, eventually you're going to get caught. No one's been able to catch him yet, but I do worry Basharat is a bit of a sitting duck on the feet. And so I do give Rodrigues the advantage when it comes to striking. The problem with this fight for Rodrigues is that Basharat is an extremely good grappler, good offensive wrestler, dangerous submission game, amazing grappling control, and the cardio to grapple hard for 3 rounds. We saw in Rodrigues' fight against CJ Vergara, his takedown offense isn't the best, quite weak off his back as well, quite easy to hold down and control. So on the feet, I give Rodrigues a slight advantage, but that won't matter if Basharat uses grappling, because Basharat can use his grappling to dictate where the fight takes place. So Rodrigues won't be able to use his edge on the feet if he's on his back, trying to deal with the grappling threat of Basharat. So, good stylistic matchup for Basharat. I would expect him to win this, but his odds are mostly baked into the odds with him being a pretty big favourite in this one. So again, this fight is an easy pass. In terms of the over-under, both guys really tough. Difficult to put away. You can see that Rodrigues has fought to a couple of decisions against a decent level. Basharat, also a bit of a decisionator. This fight almost went to a decision. This fight went to a decision. I think it's pretty likely this fight will go the distance. Unfortunately, the odds reflect that. The odds are quite steep on the fight to go to a decision, so I don't see much value there. I'm not going to be betting that. The only prop I would consider would be Basharat by decision. As you can see, the odds are absolutely terrible, so can't bet that. Odds are a bit dead on the props and over-unders on this fight, so I hope you found that useful. So, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget, if you want a free trial to live betting, you know what to do. Left the instructions at the beginning of the video. Hit the like button if you like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Head on over to my website, mabettingtips.com, for breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend, a great week. I love you all very much. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you all with another breakdown video very soon. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.